This is the Diverse Leaders Conversation Podcast, the only podcast for diverse leaders and founders. With your hosts, Dawn Morton-Young and Kat Wildman. The Diverse Leaders Conversation Podcast, starting up and rising up against the odds.
Welcome to one of our special Black History Month episodes of the Diverse Leaders Conversation Podcast. And I'm really excited today because I've not only got the gorgeous Kat with me today, because I had been doing some of this on my own, but we've also got Adam Rodriguez, and it's Lawrence-Rodrigues, isn't it? Is that what you prefer?
That's
with
right.
us today,
That's right.
Who was one of my coaching clients. So I'm really excited to see him again today and to have this conversation with him. So, Kat, I'll let you kick off and we'll start things off.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm pleased to be here. What an amazing time to join. So Adam/Lawrence, is your preferred name Lawrence?
No, firstly, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be talking to you both. So my name is Adam Lawrence-Rodrigues. I was Adam Lawrence by birth, but then I've taken my wife's second name and I've double-barreled it. So now I go by Adam Lawrence-Rodrigues, or when I'm trying to sound a bit cooler, just Adam LR. If I write a book one day, it's going to be by Adam LR, I think.
I love it. Yeah, double-barreling. I mean, how can we not start there? But let's start with an introduction from you. So how would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. So my name is Adam. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm mixed race. So my father comes from the Caribbean, so a little island called St. Vincent, and then my mother is like white English. Don't know how much further I've got to go. I'm in my 30s. In the 30s club, which is great. And I've pretty much always lived in the south of England as well. So I've not got as much of experience in terms of moving around the country too much. I lived up north for a little bit, but pretty much my bread and butter's been down south in England.
Great. Thanks, Adam. So obviously this podcast is for diverse leaders and founders. So could you tell us what you do? Are you a leader within an organization? Are you a founder? And what type of work do you do?
Yeah, of course. So in my day-to-day, I'm a fundraising manager, and I work for a fairly well-known charity. So I do that as part of my day-to-day. My passion is mental health. So even outside of that, I lead a group of volunteers in some voluntary work that I do as well for an organisation where there are people who are struggling a bit with suicidal thoughts and feelings. So I lead like a team of 7 there as well, and support them. So I think I'm a mixed bag really. So I do a bit of charity work, but also that voluntary work as well kind of covers my passion.
Okay, I love that.
Amazing. Oh my goodness. I love the charity that you work for and I love your specialist area. I think it's really, really important. So how do you think your journey into leadership has been influenced by your diverse characteristics, either positively or negatively?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that there's definitely 2 sides of the coin. And I think being mixed race is probably quite central to that as well. So I'll start with the positives. So I'd be lying if I'd said that. So I was raised by a white family more than anything else. And I think a lot of how I present is a bit more white, if you were to put it that way. So I feel that whenever I've been within an organization, and I've never had this feedback directly, but I've definitely always felt that I was like a safe minority, So whenever I looked around my peers, particularly within fundraising, pretty much it was me and a lot of other kind of white colleagues, usually white women, but the kind of key characteristics were white colleagues. So I think I always stood out straight away. There was always a lot of talk about, everywhere I've been, I've worked at about 5 or 6 different organizations in my career, and there's always been that, we're looking to kind of look for diverse talent, kind of promote from within, etc. And I was always quite ambitious and quite ruthless. And I think when I've always worked for lots of different organizations, I've generally had very positive feedback. And my expectation was always that there was an expectation that actually I should be kind of being promoted, moving through the ranks, etc. And I think I always received really positive feedback, but I only in one organization, I think, was I ever really kind of had a real conversation about my future. I was actively kind of promoted within that role. I think where I've got to now, I've had to be really kind of, like I said before, ruthless and just change jobs and go where I thought was best for my career at the time. And, you know, reflecting back on what I said about the kind of positives and where that mixed raceness maybe comes in a little bit, I've always felt a little bit more the way I present has often been seen a little bit as safe. And I've also represented a minority as well. So I've never been, I don't think I'm egotistical, but I don't like to put myself down either. But I've been very aware of the fact that I'm in a sector right now where, in terms of my protective characteristics, I have that and I have an experience that maybe others don't have. But I've not yet seen a lot of other people like me. Like, I don't see a lot of Black managers. I don't see a lot of Asian managers within fundraising, you know, and I think sometimes I do question myself a little bit about kind of how I got here, you know, was it through my ability, etc., or, you know, is there a need to kind of present as well? We have diverse talent within our managerial pool, etc. So I've always felt like I've been fairly good, but I will admit there's been that lingering thought in the back of my mind that actually, well, is there something else at play? And actually, am I taking a position of maybe another colour, like a person of colour or someone who's a bit darker? Because I definitely benefit a bit from colorism there. But in terms of the negatives, though, I've kind of touched on this a second ago. But despite frequent, what I would say, positive praise, it was only that one occasion where somebody really sat me down and said, okay, this is where we see you within the organization. You know, I generally received quite good feedback throughout my career. I generally kind of was very good with my objectives, but only one place I worked in where somebody actually really pushed me to kind of develop and be promoted within the organization. And this was part of the reason why I had to move quite a lot. And the organization that I worked for before my last one were particularly not great at this. I had a substantial budget. I managed more so than a lot of the directors at that organisation.
Right.
I beat my targets fairly easily there. You know, I felt like I was even quite positive feedback from my peers, etc. But I never saw that development. I never had that conversation. There was never that focus on kind of what I could be within the organisation. And, you know, it was made even worse for me a little bit when I had an equivalent colleague who was in a very similar role to me. He was a bit younger than me. He was a white colleague. I do admit he presented very well. We kind of presented as you might expect. And he was very typical of someone within the fundraising sector, within a charity. Then I became really disheartened to see him getting like opportunities that maybe I wasn't receiving. So, for example, and this wasn't anything to do with pay, for example, or being awarded an initial promotion. He was getting opportunities of sitting on boards, or he was in kind of project groups, or there were kind of key projects coming up where his name was kind of first. And I felt really overlooked from that. And it was becoming quite clear to me that I wasn't being considered as someone who could be a leader in that organization. And actually, I was just someone who could just do a job. So that was my motivation to leave. And that's why I joined my current organization. And it feels a lot better at my current organization. But I'd be lying if I said I've had one of those careers where I haven't actively had to kind of push for development, push for kind of opportunities, promotion, etc. You know, it's always been, well, I've given an organization a chance. Quite often I felt a bit let down or disappointed. So I felt the need to try somewhere else.
I find that really interesting. Sorry, what you were saying about, because you mentioned the word ruthless a couple of times. And I found that interesting because, you know, in terms of what I do and what I found in my own experience is that we feel as if, and I don't think that this just applies to people from an ethnic minority. I think it's any of the minority groups that we speak about, is this need to fight to get to where it is that we're going. I don't think that the typical standard that we have of the middle-aged white male had such a need or feel the need that they need to be ruthless or to tear people down just to get to a basic leadership position. But I think that is something that we feel that we experience more in the workplace. I don't know whether that's what what you were trying to say or what you felt, but I found that interesting that you use that word, because it can sometimes feel like that, like you've got to be ruthless to get to the same places as others are able to.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think maybe the kind of terminology was around being passive or kind of a bit more active. And I've not really felt that just by being passive and doing my job that I'd be provided with those opportunities to kind of prove myself or progress within an organisation. And it's often been made clear to me, not by what's been said, but by what's not been said. And I feel like I'm an ambitious person, and I wasn't someone that was going to accept somebody not seeing that potential, or somebody who didn't want to kind of challenge me a little bit more. So I felt the need to be more proactive. And I've had feedback from peers and colleagues being like, oh, you never stay in a job too long, sort of thing. And there's some truth in there, but my view has always been, if I have a reason to stay, I will stay. I don't really believe in this, well, job for life, we have that loyalty to the job. I'm very aware of the fact that in a lot of organizations, if push comes to shove, I'm probably quite expendable. So I've had to have that mindset where actually, if I want to kind of get where I need to go, if I kind of want to progress, I need to go for the hot hand, and I need to go where I feel they would give me that opportunity. And I think where I've got to right now in my career is it's been kind of a pattern of those proactive moves to where I felt I'd be challenged, or where I would get an opportunity to do something a little different that I wasn't quite getting at other organizations.
That is a really interesting point that you make. So, do you know what? I've had so many CVs where I've been looking at them with a diverse panel, and it's someone who's moved around every couple of years to get to the next role. And people are like, looks like low loyalty there. They've had a lot of moves. But my CV looks exactly the same. It's a similar thing of, you come in at one level and people are not putting you forward for whatever reason. I was going to ask you, when you were talking in your first bit about, were you seeing your colleagues getting advanced? And you clearly were. I mean, did you ever raise that with your organisation? Would you ever raise that? And if you had, looking back, what would you expect the outcome to have been? And why wouldn't you raise it?
I think at this point in my career, I feel quite confident to raise anything that I don't think is how it should be. I think now I've had enough experience to know what is appropriate and what isn't. And I would definitely challenge at this point in my career, but there's no way I would have done when I was younger. I come from a very working class background, quite often within the charity sector, especially, I do see people who I know are quite comfortable. I know that actually they like their job, but they don't need their job, like they have other things that they could be supported with. And I never felt like I had that. I always felt like I had to play ball. I had to do what I was told a little bit, because there was no backup for me. I really wanted to progress. And actually, if I didn't assimilate, then kind of there was a consequence for me. So I think previously I didn't feel that empowered to do that. The time I did, though, was in the job I was at previous to this, where as she said, I was seeing that. I was on an interview panel for someone who I hired as a senior officer when I was a fundraising manager. And then just by the time I left, they were head of department. So they'd been promoted twice in a time that I hadn't even been promoted once. And there was a couple of others around the organisation, and it was exactly the same. And there was someone, for example, where they'd been in the organisation for 6 months and they'd had their title changed for what mine was at the time to becoming a head of department. And this was never even discussed with me. And I found it quite gross. And I was starting to become more aware of kind of the reasons why this might be. So I did start to challenge it a little bit with my boss. And my boss she was a little bit of a people pleaser in some ways. She would come to me and she was very apologetic about things. She'd be like, oh my God, you're right, I'm so sorry. That's what I would hear. And it was very validating. But at that point, nothing happened. She wouldn't go and kind of fight for me. She wouldn't go and talk to her manager about it. She wouldn't really do anything. She wouldn't tell me what I needed to do to get to the next level. There was no real explanation. So I was just left in a bit of limbo. And that limbo feeling, I think, was the thing that ultimately encouraged me to move. And I think now I'd be even more proactive about it than I was before. But at the time, it was becoming obvious that I was not seen as someone they wanted within their leadership team, or within kind of more senior management, whereas there were others who were kind of earmarked from day one as being someone who actually they were quite comfortable with. And, I think organizations sometimes pretend that conversations in the board don't get down to more junior staff, but they do, because people talk. And, you know, I'd heard rumblings about certain people within the department who were favourites or earmarked for progression. There was no official talent scheme. There were just people that were spoken about in those circles. And as far as I was aware, my name never came up in those circles. So in the end, I just gave up a little bit and just tried somewhere else instead.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is absolutely shocking. I bet so many people will be resonating so much with what you've just said, because it's those things that are so difficult to put your finger on. And when you raise them, all of those things you just described, Dawn and I are highly resonant with all of them. We're like, oh, that's happened to me so many times. But did you feel like if you tried to raise any of those things, or, you know, what actually, another way to phrase it, what would your advice be to somebody who, you know, genuine advice, if it's move companies, get the heck out of there because there's no point raising it, fair enough. But what would your advice be to people listening to this who are experiencing that exact same thing?
I think at that point for me, I'd lost confidence in the organisation at that point. There was enough that had happened that I'd understood that it didn't matter what I did at that point. I had very little power. I wasn't being listened to. They had almost made my mind up for me. So that was where I was at the time. But what I would say to others in that situation where actually they do have hope for that organisation and potentially they maybe are being overlooked, I'd say challenge it, have that conversation, use examples where possible. You know, I think if I was keen to stay there and I could do that again, I think firstly I would say, look, I've seen these examples around the organisation. There is no transparent process why this has happened. I need to understand a bit more about why they've been kind of promoted, why they've been given these opportunities and why I haven't. And if I wasn't given that at that point, I'd say I don't give up on that conversation, because I think it's perfectly acceptable to ask for some clarity and some transparency on why things are happening, or maybe why things aren't happening for you. And if in particular your manager isn't feeding back to you, or if they're feeding back to you that you're great but nothing is happening for you, I think have that open conversation with them. You know, it's perfectly fine to say, I'm hearing a lot of praise, I'm doing a lot of good things here, but I'm not seeing that translated to an action, and I need to understand a bit more why that is, or is there anything that's going to change in the future? But I think I could have handled that conversation a bit better now compared to where I would have been a bit earlier in my career.
Can I just ask, so you said earlier on that you feel that you're kind of a safe minority. So obviously you're mixed race, you were brought up in a white household. So I guess maybe more the way that you speak, maybe the way that you present, you kind of can be palatable. So do you think then, so I always have, I guess, the feeling that because there isn't enough exposure to different cultures, to different things, that is why when they happen to see other cultures or other ways of expressing or other ways of showing up, it becomes that scary thing that they don't know what to do with, which is hence why I'm so keen on that kind of belonging piece, where the organisation first starts to understand the people that need to belong. So in terms of all of that being said, that piece that you had about the assimilation, I think that that's key there, because what we do, I know what I did was to try to be as white as I possibly could within the work environment. So, you know, what I mean by that is obviously I can't be white, but I would, how do they speak? How do they interact with each other? Let me copy that. Let me emulate that. Do you see? And it's kind of, it's that version of assimilation, but I think it happens in other areas as well. So, for example, with Her Royal Highness Majesty the Queen's death, and I wasn't going to talk about this today, but here we are. With that, there are a lot of different emotions for a lot of different people. But because there are those that don't understand from a cultural point of view why there may be those people that are not reduced to ultimate sadness because of her passing, but they don't know and they don't understand because we've spent our lives acting like we're okay. We've spent our lives assimilating, not talking outside of our own communities about our experiences and what we felt. So my mum is 73. she comes from a small Caribbean island. She said she remembers when the royal family came to visit and she was made to stand out there with this flag and waving. And she said even at that point, as a child, she resented it. And she didn't know why she resented it. And then yesterday she said to me, you know, she was an old lady. She's the only queen that I ever knew. But my problem with her is that she never stood up and spoke out about what was happening to members of the Commonwealth in her country. And so for her, but me hearing that from her, I'm like, wow, you wouldn't even know that people notice that. People that come from that era that would even notice that it's true. You know, we were invited here. We came here as Commonwealth people to help build up the country. And we came to racism. And the monarch never ever stood up and told her people to stop being racist towards us and that we were part of her Commonwealth. And so, but what I'm saying is if we all start to speak that out now, we'll be looked at like, wow, you know, all of this disrespect towards the Queen, but it's because we've been assimilating within society and not really speaking our truths. And I think that same thing can be, I guess, attributed, and I don't know, I might get cancelled for this podcast for saying what I just did. I don't know, you know, it's kind of, and I think that's what it is. It's that fear of being seen as a troublemaker, or you're not grateful for something, or, you know, you're trying to be different in the spaces that you're in, which causes us to clamp up, either not speaking or trying to behave like everyone else. So I just from what you were saying, it just kind of brought me into this kind of real life example that I'm sitting in personally at the moment, where I just don't really know what to say. So yeah.
Yeah, I was quite different like 10 years ago. I was having a conversation with my colleague the other day, and she's American, and she was like, well, she was talking about Stormzy, and she was like, you don't talk like Stormzy. And I was thinking, well, no, I don't. Well, first, it's like Brummy first, but the kind of second thought in my head was like, oh, there's this perception of me that I have like this English accent, or, you know, and as I hear myself, I'm like, I do. And it's totally different to how I used to speak. I mean, I said speak now, I would have said talk, like normally. But no, and for me, it's a power dynamic thing, because 10 years ago, I didn't have any power. And I had to assimilate, because that was the only way I was going to survive. And that's how I perceived it at the time. And I've always found that need to code switch, whatever situation I'm in. And it's been a very handy tool to have in the kind of office environment. And even now, I feel more powerful. I feel more confident in myself. I don't need to assimilate as much, but old habits die hard. It's been with me for about 10 years now. It's quite difficult to know kind of who I really am, or who is the version of me that's trying to present itself to the surroundings to kind of make everybody else comfortable. The Queen situation is very interesting, and I don't care if I get cancelled. So, but I mean, even yesterday, like it came up, and I was one of those people that was very unemotional about it, and I still am. And, you know, there was quite a lot going on in my organisation, and there was like a message from the CEO and everything. And the message was, I just got from the message, without describing too much was in it, that this person just didn't get why people maybe would feel a bit unemotional towards it, or maybe would be a bit indifferent about it in some ways. And a lot of those people are going to come from Commonwealth countries, or like former Commonwealth countries. And I didn't feel like I could say what I wanted to say, because I was in this environment where I was like, this is the accepted norm, and actually I can't go against that. You know, I'm going to be looked at as someone that actually I'm coming with something quite drastically different. You know, I don't know how that's going to work out for me. And yeah, I mean, it's an interest. It's an interesting one.
100%. It is a really interesting one. I think, you know, I'm 100% sad that she has, you know, somebody's past. It's all I've known as a queen, isn't it? It's all that we've known. But, you know, from the point of view of, even if I look at certain things that have happened over the last year with Prince Andrew and all of that kind of thing, I'm like, how how emotional can I be about this? I'm not sure. And I think I'm still in that place where I'm not sure. And I'll leave it there. Really.
I'm glad you said it, because you know what? There's so much pathos out there about the Queen. I've had like so many WhatsApp chats with people with crying emojis. Like, she was a 96-year-old woman. She had the most blessed and charmed life that anyone could ever experience, and now she's died. You know, that's okay. She had the most wonderful, privileged, rich lifestyle, and yeah, she sacrificed a normal life, but actually, I mean, sign me up for sacrificing a normal life.
But you know, it's kind of, yes, and we're maybe going off topic a little bit.
We're all going to get cancelled.
Yeah, it's maybe going off topic a bit, but yes, you know, she had to sacrifice her normal life, but it's because she was born into royalty, in the same way that I was born into black skin, and so there are certain sacrifices that I'm forced to make every day, the same way that you was born a woman, and there's certain sacrifice that you, does that make sense? So it's like, you know, yeah, I get it, life of service, all of that, but she didn't have a choice. You know, it wasn't that she went and applied for the job of Queen and they interviewed her and then she's given up her whole life to be the Queen. She had no choice. And so it's a conversation all on its own, I think.
Yeah, and for me, because of...
Say that again, Kat, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Kat.
Well, I said we should do a Queen special next, but go on.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, sorry, I guess because of the racism I've experienced growing up, I've always been quite interested and learned about kind of like history, about kind of other cultures, like the British Empire, etc. And I think as a result, I'm quite well read on it. And you know, it goes back to kind of what you said, Dawn, before about there are some people maybe that have this view, and maybe people like me, I've made a mistake where I've not challenged it. And actually, I'm aware of some things, and there are some things they just don't teach you in school, and I should have done better to kind of challenge in those situations, because it might be that these people maybe would have understood why some people would have seen the royal family as being problematic, or why me in this position where I might be a bit unresponsive to kind of what's happened. Because like I said, everything I know about kind of what I hold the royal family accountable for around kind of Commonwealth, empire, colonization, you know, atrocities in Africa. I mean, even more recently, you know, with everything that happened with Meghan Markle and stuff like that, you can't expect me, like you know, I don't want anyone to pass away, but as you both mentioned, you know, she's lived a good life. She made 96. I mean, I won't make 96. Definitely not. You know, so if I make 96, you know, I'll just look back and be like, yeah. But for me, you know, I guess I want a bit of tact and understanding that actually I appreciate, in the same way that I'm not being that challenging of some people that are finding it quite difficult. I would like people to understand as well why the royal family as a whole and the head of that family may be a bit problematic or present some negative memories or connotations for some people. Yeah,
and I think that's kind of talking about, when I was talking earlier on about the kind of the culture, particularly within the workplace, etc., that you kind of need to cultivate for belonging and being open to hearing about other people so that you can understand where they're coming from. This country do not understand why there would be this opposing opposing view. The majority of people, they don't really understand. And even if we look at the Meghan Markle thing, they never blamed her. They never thought really that they did. It was us that was sitting here saying the papers are being obviously racist. The royal family is being obviously racist. It was us sitting here shouting again to this wall that we don't seem to ever be able to get through. And my neighbours outside do not get it. And so that's kind of where I guess we feel stuck with being able to express ourselves and help people to understand where we're coming from. Because without that understanding, we won't get any further than where we are now.
I mean, is this like, so as a white person in the room here, is this a place where allies, so as a white person and an anti-racist, it's been a journey for me to find like where am I needed? Where can I help? You know, it's like fighting a massive fire and I've got a bucket and I'm like, where can I throw this water? Like, how can I be most helpful? I don't want to go to a place where everyone's throwing the water. What I have found is that as a white person, I am privy to conversations that would never be had in front of a person who experiences racism. So those casual throwaway comments, those blatant inappropriate comments, blatant racism, microaggressions, just witnessing things basically. And that is a bit where I feel like I can definitely, I'm like, anti-racism in the house, people, right, it's time, let's sit down and talk about what you just said. It's those sorts of things for sure. It's looking around and seeing who isn't in the room and why are they not. But also, I think this is a really big instance where allies can be a massive help of going, Dawn, how do you feel about the Queen's passing? You know, Adam, how do you feel about it? Because actually because I will always look at it from my perspective, as will every single individual person. When Will Smith slapped that guy, I looked at it from the male violence perspective, and I looked at it like, oh God, is that a great example of solving problems? But when I spoke to my black friends and colleagues, they had the black women had a different view on it. The black men had a different view to the black women, and everyone's perspective was different to mine, and it helped shape a really well-rounded conversation about that stuff. You know, it's like, I'm so disappointed that you did that. Why did you do it? We've all been working so hard. Come on. And then there's hey, you're standing up for his woman. Nobody stands up for people anymore. You know, this is good. And that was a conversation that was needed. So I feel like potentially this could be a great ally moment for people in workplaces to go, how do you feel about it? And listen. You know, listen, not to disagree and be, oh, but the Queen. Listen, to understand a different perspective, right? And open the conversation and be there as backup if someone's like, oh, you know, Dawn's always talking about race all the time. Like, no, she's not. I asked her a question. You know, what do you guys think about that?
that is
I think you raise a good point.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Adam. I'll let you go.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say, I think you raise a good point, because there's just this norm in the workplace where I think I think people feel like there's one view on something. So even with the situation with the Queen, no one asked me. No one said, how do you feel about this? There's also almost an assumption about it. And I'm not going to force my view on anyone, but if somebody asks me, I think I will be quite honest about it. And it's interesting when you mention kind of Chris Rock and Will Smith. It was similar, you know, it threw, in some ways, it sounds strange, but it threw a flashback up for me where I remember everyone in the office was saying, oh, how disgusting, you know, there was this accepted view that it was totally wrong. And, you know, I was silently sitting there thinking, well, I'm seeing this guy on stage in a position of power, thinking he's protected by this veil of power, money, kind of the whole, everything going on there. And he felt he could say what he wanted. And if he was anywhere else, he just would not have said that. You know, he held behind that position of power because he thought he would be protected from it. But strangely, he wasn't in this case. So I didn't really agree or disagree, but I wasn't one of the people saying, oh, that's disgusting. You know, my view was like, well, he never would have said that to Will Smith anywhere where he felt he wasn't protected by it. And he would have expected that consequence anywhere else. So, you know, it was kind of a bit of a bullying move in some ways to be like, well, I can say it now because I've got all this security and I'm in front of an audience of, I don't know, like 100 million people, so I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, I think that one for me, I was disappointed in Will Smith because of what he was there to promote. I think that the whole thing took away from the Williams sisters, the movie, the King Richard movie. I think it took away from that. I think it also highlighted again black men being violent. And at the level that you are at, if you're going to behave in that manner, the difference between what Will Smith did and what Chris Rock did is Chris Rock is a comedian and he was being a comedian. Whether or not we find it offensive, whether or not, I don't know whether he knew that she had the condition and whether or not Chris Rock is quite an offensive guy anyway. I don't find him to be tame in the way that he delivers his comedy. But Will Smith responding in that way, I just believe that there are different ways that he could have done that. especially because he's also a comedian. You could have clapped back in a way that was not clapping back, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm not sure about that situation, but I think that you're right. What Kat was saying earlier on, I think having white allies or other allies creating spaces where we're able to express ourselves is actually the only way, because what it seems like, and I've seen this recently on LinkedIn, is that people are looked at as being militant because all they speak about is race. So because they're coming and they're saying, no, I don't, and they're being quite forthright with that, they're now being looked at as, oh no, we can't, it's scary. Does that make sense? It's like, oh, this person's always coming at me. And that whole black aggression thing and all of that. So I think that having white allies open up spaces in the same way that it happens in the LGBTQ plus community or that's asked to happen in that community, if they're opening up the spaces and they're asking the questions, it gives us room to be able to come through and speak our truth. So like, for example, and I might not take this bit out of the podcast. So yesterday, it's just my VA. So my VA is Indian, based in India. She sent me an email and she said, oh, I want to do a post for the Queen. I'm going to send it to you for approval. Or she said something, or here it is, are you okay with it? And I sent her back an email and I basically said, I don't know whether I will, but I'm definitely not ready now to do anything on the Queen. And I'm not going to write about all of this. She spent her life doing this and she was exemplary and all of this. So I don't want to do it. Anyway, she must not have saw my email and she's posted it on LinkedIn. So I've started to get notifications on my phone saying so-and-so's liked your LinkedIn post for the Queen. And I've gone in and immediately just deleted it. Now, somebody, if I told that story outside of this circle, they would be like, that's just a really horrible thing to do. But I need to, part of the reason that I do what I do is because I need to be true to what impact I think I can make in the world and my principles that allow me to do that. And so I'm not going to jump on a bandwagon because I'm in the business community with a lot of business people around me and start to pander to what today's narrative is. And so, yeah, for me, that's why I was like, I'm not going to do that post, giving condolences or any of that. I haven't spoken about it, even on my personal social media. I got into it a little bit with some people in a group when they were talking about, the Queen has served you all and all this. And I'd had to go in and be like, served who? When my mum came here, it said no blacks on the windows. I don't know who she was serving, but it wasn't my mum. So it wasn't my grandmother, it wasn't my uncle, it wasn't my aunt, it wasn't me. And so, but I think that what you're saying, Kat, having white allies give us the space to be able to, the permission to be able to express ourselves is where others will start to listen, because I think that's what it is. They hear us talking and it's almost like a kind of thing. And nobody listens to us because they just complain.
I'm not sure it's even that. I'm not sure it's even like a blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's even a blah, blah, blah thing. I think it's just immediately the defenses go up and they're thinking about what they can say next to like convince you to their point of view. I see it all the time. I see it straight away. And I see immediately people just stop listening and they give like a sort of, oh my gosh, I'm under attack. That attitude really gets right up my nose. Someone else's opinion and point of view should not be able to hurt your feelings. If you're that hurt by someone else having their own opinion, history, background and relationship with the royal family, you need to get some help. To be completely honest,
disgusting person yesterday. You're really such a despicable person. And I said, why? I haven't said anything other than this is the history. These are the facts, and this is why I'm not in the same place as you, because these are my facts. This is my truth. But when people can't, that's what they start. They resort to insults because they're emotionalizing that I'm basically attacking an old defenseless lady. And that is not what it is at all. But yes.
She's the opposite of an old defenseless lady. But hey, Adam, let's talk about organizations making a difference and actually truly making a difference and getting diverse talent to leadership levels. So as an inside mole, I get to hear a lot of organizations talking about, we've hired for diversity and the talent is not making leadership level, and I just don't understand it. We've talked a little bit about the bias built into systems and processes, basically to hammer every single diverse hire into the mold of leadership. In terms of diverse leaders and authenticity, it's obviously really difficult. And we talked about it a little bit before. We talked about trying to be authentic when there's a massive power differential. It's much easier to be authentic when you have the confidence and the power is a little bit more even, and you can be like, do you know what, this is what I think, this is the authentic me. But as you said, rightly so, and I was wondering if you're going to say that, it's really hard. I went through that, obviously to a lesser degree. The only barrier I face is having a womb. However, when I got to leadership level and I was like, I need to be authentic now, I realized, I was like, who am I? Who am I in the workplace? Because I've been told since I was 22 years old, you need to be more ruthless, you need to be direct, you need to be ferocious, you need to take a tough line, you need to have gravitas. So I had spent my whole career being a totally different person. People used to be like, Kat's a real ass kicker. Oh, don't pee her off. She's not going to take any nonsense. Anyone who knows me, Dawn knows me, I am a golden Labrador wearing clothes. I want to jump up and lick you and be your friend and lie down, have you rub my tummy. I'm not that sort of a person. I'm not a person who's going to come into the boardroom and start shouting at people and tearing them down. That was inauthentic all the way. But having to be an authentic leader was a really hard journey. So how far along that journey would you say you are, and how have you found it?
Yeah, I think I'm in the middle of the journey right now. I think, being quite frank, I feel like I'm on a journey personally as well with my own identity. Like I'm going through therapy at the moment, and I'm talking a lot about kind of what makes me me. And I felt quite a lot that, maybe similar to what you were saying, Kat, that I've been trying so hard to kind of almost be what I thought the business environment wanted me to be. I've now got to a point where I work for an organization where they're fairly accepting of who I am, where I'm a bit like, oh, what is me, sort of thing, and I haven't quite established that. So, I feel like I'm getting there, but I'm still not quite there yet. I think I want to ultimately be in a position where I can feel as comfortable as possible to just be me and have faith that the organization will respect that this is my expertise, this is my opinion, this is what I've learned, and this is what I'm bringing to the organization. But I still find myself at points holding back or doing things a little differently. I mean, for example, similar to you, I'm quite a soft guy, I'm not an aggressive guy, but I can be quite assertive. And I think that assertiveness has been born out of the kind of business or kind of like organization environment a little bit more. And even within my current organization, I've had quite a lot of firm conversations about, I guess, my expectations of my colleagues, or where I've not quite seen something go right, I've fed it back because I believe this is the right thing to do. Not once have I said anything I believe to be too harsh, unprofessional. It's all been very professional within business organizational capacity. Time to time, I have had that feedback to my manager that I'm being too challenging, and I've not accepted it because I don't believe I'm being too challenging. I think the other side is more, they're not quite used to this and not quite used to how to handle it. So their kind of default has almost been to go back to my manager and be like, oh, can you help me with this situation a little bit? And my manager's very supportive. So she wants me to kind of continue doing what I'm doing. But what I'm finding at this point is that I don't want to be known as, I've always been averse to being the aggressive guy. I think like, I'm not that big in terms of height, I'm quite athletically built, and I always have been. And, I've always felt that I've, at points, because of what has been said or what has been suggested, that I can be quite intimidating at points. And I'm getting some reflections on that now, where when I am trying to assert myself a little bit, I'm thinking, oh, I'm getting this feedback from a few people. I don't want this to be my business reputation. So at times I found myself pulling back a little bit, even when I felt it was right to feedback or have that conversation. And that's not right. That's not where I want to be. I want to be in a place where actually this is right for the organisation, this is right for me. I believe that this is the right thing to do, and to be quite firm and quite straight about that. But I feel like I'm in an in-between area at the moment where actually I'm willing to be more assertive, more challenging, and do what I think is right, but not too much, because I still have this kind of like trauma, if you want to call it that, or kind of previous fear that I'll have this perception about me as a person. And I really do have that fear. I think even right now, if somebody said to me, "Oh, you're really aggressive," in my head, I'd be like in the work capacity, in my head, I'd be thinking, don't think I am, but what might come out as a person, I might be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," I'd almost be the one on the defensive at that point. And I want to be in a position where actually I feel confident and empowered that actually I think, no, this is correct. This is what I'm saying is right. It's not my issue, it's their issue. And I need to stick to my guns a little bit here.
Yeah, I think
let's stay on this topic, because I think, again, Dawn, you need to coach us here, because this aggressive term comes up and it triggers people so much. What is the rebuke to that comment? When someone says you're being very aggressive, what does one say? I find it really difficult as well.
I think it's about, again, so obviously the first thing people say is I'm asserting myself. It's just because I may look a certain way, it may be coming across to you as if it's aggressive, or my way of speaking is not the same as your way of speaking. But, in the same way that if a child shouts and an adult shouts, the aggression is looked at as two different things, isn't it? But again, it goes back to my conversation about it's because they don't know us. We don't know each other. Does that make sense? So you don't know the real person. So like people that know me, they might be like, okay, let's give you an example. There's people from certain Caribbean islands or certain African countries where they'll be like, those people are really loud. So if you hear them and they're shouting, it's not that they're shouting at you, that's just the way they speak. But because I know them, it wouldn't feel like that to me. Does that make sense? So I think, again, it brings us back to that whole thing of creating spaces where we can be ourselves, where they come to maybe learn about us. It's almost like we've been here all of these years and nobody's taken a minute to learn anything apart from, and I'll talk from my own experience, Bob Marley, jerk chicken, and, it's like, that's as far as the extent as they know about us, and single parent families. That's kind of the idea that we have. Have I turned into a robot now?
Yeah,
but I did want to say, so we're coming to the end, Adam, and it's been really great. We could have this conversation. I feel like we need a 2-hour session. But I did want to ask you, as we close, which is something that we try to ask all of our guests, is if there was one thing, and the other thing I wanted to say is congratulations to you on doing therapy and having therapy and going through that journey, because I know that it's not easy to decide to do that, and it's also not easy to be so vulnerable as well with another person. So, kudos to you. And I would encourage anyone, and particularly people from underrepresented groups as we are, that there is a lot of trauma that we've experienced during our working lives, and therapy is a way of helping us to be able to manage that within our own psyche, so that we can then be able to proceed in the world without being triggered at every point and having all of these things thrown at us. So I just wanted to say that. But also, if there was one piece of advice, or one thing an organisation could do or could have done to make a positive difference to underrepresented leaders in the workplace, what would it be?
This is difficult because you're only asking me for one. I feel like there's a few things. It's really basic, but it's listening. It's a two-way conversation. I think this is what has held me back. I don't think, like, if I go back to when I was mentioning that I've never had this conversation, I didn't feel heard, I've left organizations, I feel that if senior leaders are serious about this, they need to really listen to kind of what their staff of colour, what ethnic staff are saying. And they need to be listening at all levels. They need to really understand kind of what is going right, what is going wrong, what's the difference. And if people leave, they really need to be putting an effort into kind of understanding why people leave. I had a previous organisation, I left and I didn't have an exit interview. How much good intel could they have got from me if they'd really understood why I left at that point? And they had taken a step back there because they'd lost someone who wasn't white. I think it was an organisation where less than 20% of staff weren't white. And they had no idea why I left. So I walked out with that information. Somebody else was going to come in. They were doomed to repeat that mistake. And they were back where they started until somebody would have had the innovative mind to actually ask the question of that person and start making change. So for me, I think listening, and I don't just mean sending out surveys, I mean active listening, having those conversations, senior leaders actually having these conversations themselves and not just having reports back from HR, etc., and then really establishing that empathy about why our ethnic staff and non-white staff, why are they unhappy? What are we doing wrong? And then kind of capitalising on that intel that they've gained and actively being brave and making that change. No half measures, not saying things like, well, we can't do that, we can't do this, because what's happening before hasn't worked. So for me, that's a sign of, okay, you need to do something innovative. You need to change what you're doing and just try something different, because what you were doing before isn't effective and hasn't been working.
Love that. Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much, Adam. And it may be so, we may do other things in the future where we have more of a round table type thing. And we'd love to invite you back to come and talk about topics that might be the Queen. It might be something else. It might be assimilation. It might be therapy. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we can discuss with you in the future. So thank you so much. Good luck. Until I speak to you, and hopefully I will see you soon. I think I'll be coming back to your workplace at some point in the next couple of months, so we should speak then.
Excellent. Thank you both for inviting me.